Good morning, friends. I wanted to read Chapter 3 of Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Chapter 3. Escape! The barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay, and it smelled of manure. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses and the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a sort of peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could happen ever again in the world. It smelled of grain, and of harness dressing, and of axle grease, and of rubber boots, and of new rope. And whenever the cat was given a fish head to eat, the barn would smell of fish. But mostly it smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loft up overhead. And there was always hay being pitched down to the cows and horses and sheep. The barn was pleasantly warm in winter when the animals spent most of their time indoors, and it was pleasantly cool in summer when the big doors stood wide open to the breeze. The barn had stalls on the main floor for the work horses, tie-ups on the main floor for the cows, a sheep hold down below for the sheep, a pig pen down below for Wilbur, and it was full of all sorts of things that you would find in barns: ladders, grindstones, pitchforks, monkey wrenches, scythes, lawnmowers, snow shovels, axe handles, milk pails, water buckets, empty grain sacks, and rusty rat traps. It was the kind of barn that swallows like to build their nests in, and it was the kind of barn that children like to play in, and the whole thing was owned by Fern's uncle, Homer L. Zuckerman. Wilbur's new home was in the lower part of the barn, directly underneath the cows. Mr. Zuckerman knew that a manure pile is a good place to keep a young pig. Pigs need warmth, and it was warm and comfortable down there in the barn cellar on the south side. Fern came every day to visit him. She found an old milking stool that had been discarded, and she placed the stool in the sheepfold next to Wilbur's pen. Here she sat quietly during the long afternoons, thinking and listening and watching Wilbur. The sheep got to know her and trust her. So did the geese who lived with the sheep. All the animals trusted her. She was so quiet and friendly. Mr. Zuckerman did not allow her to take Wilbur out, and he did not allow her to get into the pig pen. But he told Fern that she could sit on the stool and watch Wilbur as long as she wanted to. It made her happy just to be near the pig, and it made Wilbur happy to know that she was sitting there right outside his pen. But he never had any fun. No walks, no rides, no swims. One afternoon in June, when Wilbur was almost 2 months old, he wandered out into his small yard outside the barn. Fern had not arrived for her usual visit. Wilbur stood in the sun, feeling lonely and bored. There's never anything to do around here, he thought. He walked slowly to his food trough and sniffed to see if anything had been overlooked at lunch. He found a small strip of potato skin and ate it. His back itched, so he leaned against the fence and rubbed against the boards. When he tired of this, he walked indoors, climbed to the top of the manure pile, and sat down. He didn't feel like going to sleep. He didn't feel like digging. He was tired of standing still and tired of lying down. "I'm less than 2 months old, and I'm tired of living," he said. He walked out to the yard again. "When I'm out here, there's no place to go but in. And when I'm indoors, there's no place to go but out in the yard." "That's where you're wrong, my friend," said a voice. Wilbur looked through the fence and saw the goose standing there. "You don't have to stay in that dirty little yard," said the goose, who talked rather fast. "One of the boards is loose. Push on it, push on it, and come on out." "What?" said Wilbur. "Say it slower." At the risk of repeating yourself," said the goose, "I suggest that you come on out. It's wonderful out here." "Did you say a board was loose?" That I did," said the goose. Wilbur walked up to the fence and saw that the goose was right. One board was loose. He put his head down, shut his eyes, and pushed. The board gave way. In a minute, he had squeezed through the fence and was standing in the long grass outside his yard. The goose chuckled. "How does it feel to be free?" she asked. "I like it," said Wilbur. "That is, I guess I like it." Actually, Wilbur felt queer to be outside his fence, with nothing between him and the big world. "Where do you think I'd better go?" "Anywhere you like, said the goose. Go down through the orchards, root up the sod. Go down through the garden, dig up the radishes, root up everything, eat grass, look for corn, look for oats, run all over, skip and dance, jump and prance. The world is a wonderful place when you're young." "I can see that," replied Wilbur. He gave a jump in the air, twirled, ran a few steps, stopped, looked all around, and sniffed the smells of the afternoon and began pushing, digging, and rooting. He felt very happy. But then Mrs. Zuckerman was the first to see him. She saw from the kitchen and shouted, "Homer, the pig's out, Lurvy, pig's out, Homer, Lurvy, pig's out. He's down there under that apple tree." "Now the trouble starts," thought Wilbur. "Now the trouble starts." "Run, run, run downhill," said the goose. "Make for the woods, the woods." "Wilbur's out," all the animals said. Every animal stirred and lifted its head and became excited to know that one of its friends was free and was no longer tied up. Wilbur didn't know what to do. "If this is what it's like to be free," he thought, "I believe I'd rather be penned up in my own yard." The cocker spaniel was sneaking up on him from one direction. You can see everyone in the picture searching for Wilbur, huh? Lurvy, the hired man, was sneaking up on him in the other direction. Mrs. Zuckerman stood ready to head him off if he started into the garden, and now Mr. Zuckerman was coming toward him carrying a pail. "I feel awful," thought Wilbur. "Why doesn't Fern come?" And he began to cry. The goose took command and began to give orders. "Don't just stand there, Wilbur. Dodge about, skip around," cried the goose. "Twist and turn, make for the woods." The cocker spaniel sprang for Wilbur's hind leg. Wilbur jumped and ran. Lurvy reached out and grabbed. Mr. Zuckerman screamed at Lurvy. The goose cheered for Wilbur. Wilbur dodged between Lurvy's legs. "Nicely done," cried the goose. "Run downhill," cried the cows. "Run toward me," yelled the gander. "Run uphill," cried the sheep. "Twist and turn," honked the goose. "Jump and dance," said the rooster. They're all the animals telling him what to do. Poor Wilbur. "Look out for Lurvy," called the cows. "Look out for Zuckerman," yelled the gander. Poor Wilbur was dazed and frightened by this hullabaloo. He didn't like being the center of all this fuss. He tried to follow the instructions his friends were giving him, but he couldn't run downhill and uphill at the same time. Then he lifted his nose and sniffed. Mr. Zuckerman was standing close, holding a pail of warm slops. The smell was delicious. Warm milk, potato skins, wheat middlings, Kellogg's cornflakes, and a popover left over from the Zuckerman's breakfast. "Come, pig," said Mr. Zuckerman. "Come, pig." Wilbur took a step toward the pail. "No, no," said the goose. "It's the pail trick, Wilbur. Don't fall for it. They'll lure you back into captivity-ivity." Wilbur didn't care. The smell was appetizing. He took another step toward the pail. "Pig, pig," said Mr. Zuckerman in a kind voice. "You'll be sorry, sorry, sorry," called the goose. "You'll miss your freedom. Our freedom is worth a barrel of slops." Wilbur didn't care. When Mr. Zuckerman reached the pig pen, he climbed over the fence and poured the slops in the trough. "Reconsider, reconsider," cried the goose. But Wilbur paid no attention. He stepped through the fence into his yard. He walked to the trough and took a long drink of slops, sucking in the milk hungrily and chewing the popover. It was good to be home again. While Wilbur ate, Lurvy fetched a hammer and some 8-penny nails and nailed a board in place. Then he and Mr. Zuckerman leaned lazily on the fence, and Mr. Zuckerman scratched Wilbur's back with a stick. "He's quite a pig," said Lurvy. "Yes, he'll make a good pig," said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur heard the words of praise. He felt the warm milk inside his stomach. He felt the pleasant rubbing of the stick on his itchy back. He felt peaceful and happy and sleepy. This had been a tiring afternoon. It was still only about 4 o'clock. But Wilbur was ready for bed. "I'm really too young to go out into the world alone," he thought, as he lay down. And that's the end of chapter 3, and we'll read chapter 4 tomorrow. Bye, friends.